What if everything you thought you knew about yourself was just an illusion? The ego, often misunderstood, is not inherently evil or wrong. It's a survival mechanism that evolved to protect us. At its core, the ego is your sense of self, a mental construct that shapes your identity through constant narration. But this identity is fragile, built on conditions and comparisons. The ego creates separation, labeling everything as good or bad, right or wrong, worthy or unworthy. It thrives on judgment, trapping you in an endless cycle of highs and lows. Success feeds it briefly, but failure or criticism sends it into panic, keeping you in self-doubt. It convinces you that you need more achievements, more validation, more approval. Yet, no matter how much you chase, it's never enough. The ego's hunger is endless, and once you see this, you begin to break free. The ego is deceptive, working behind the scenes to maintain control. It manipulates your thoughts, emotions, and even your sense of self without you realizing it. But it's all an illusion. One of its strongest tactics is distraction. Have you ever tried to sit in silence only to be overwhelmed by racing thoughts? That's the ego keeping you from presence, because in the present moment, its grip weakens. It feeds on overthinking, making you replay past mistakes or stress about the future. As long as you're lost in these mental loops, you remain blind to the truth. The ego isn't you. Comparison is another tool the ego uses. It constantly measures your worth against others, making you feel either inferior or falsely superior. This keeps you trapped, always needing validation. But once you start recognizing these patterns, the ego loses its hold. You realize these thoughts are not personal, just habits. And like any habit, they can be unlearned. Fear is the ego's secret weapon. It whispers doubts and insecurities, keeping you frozen in place. The ego uses fear as a barrier to growth, convincing you to stay in your comfort zone where things feel safe and familiar. But fear is nothing more than a projection of your mind. It's not real, it's a story the ego tells to maintain control over you. Think about the last time you wanted to take a big step, whether it was starting a new job, expressing your feelings, or pursuing a dream. What stopped you? Chances are it was fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown. But was that fear based on actual danger? Probably not. Most fears are imagined, rooted in what-ifs and hypotheticals. The ego thrives on this because fear keeps you stuck. It makes you second-guess yourself, overanalyze decisions, and hesitate. But when you see fear for what it is, an illusion, you begin to strip the ego of its power. Fear can't survive in the present moment because it's always tied to the past or the future. By grounding yourself in the now, you weaken its grip and take back control. The ego's greatest trick is its most deceptive. It convinces you that without it, you will lose everything: your identity, ambition, and purpose. It makes you believe you need it to survive. But this is the ultimate illusion. Imagine a bird caged for so long that it forgets what it means to fly. The cage becomes its reality, and leaving feels terrifying. This is how the ego operates. It builds walls and calls them protection, making you believe they keep you safe. But in truth, they are what hold you back from real freedom. The moment you question this, the ego resists. But letting go isn't losing control, it's gaining it. True control comes from aligning with your deeper self, the part connected to peace, clarity, and purpose. Once you recognize this, the ego's grip weakens. You realize you don't need to cling to false identities or external validation. You are not your achievements or failures. You are something far greater. Awareness is the key to breaking the ego's hold. When you observe your thoughts without judgment, you create distance between yourself and the ego. And in that space, transformation begins. Imagine catching yourself comparing your life to someone else's. Instead of being consumed by jealousy or doubt, you simply notice the thought. That moment of awareness breaks the cycle. It's like turning on a light, the illusion fades. Awareness isn't about suppressing the ego or battling it. It's about seeing it for what it is, a part of you but not the real you. The more you cultivate awareness, the more you connect with your true self, the self beyond thoughts, labels, and fear. And the beauty of awareness is that it's always within reach. No matter where you are, you can pause, breathe, and become present. And in that presence, the ego loses its power. Control is the ego's playground, the stage where it puts on its most convincing performance. But the moment you see through its tricks, you begin to understand something deeper. You don't need to control life, you just need to be in it. And when you do that, true freedom begins. Have you ever felt like something is holding you back, like an unseen force is shaping your thoughts, emotions, and actions? The ego thrives on labels because they give it a sense of identity. These labels define how we present ourselves, creating an illusion of stability. Whether it's successful, failure, smart, parent, or artist, these identities act as the ego's anchors. Without them, the ego fears losing itself entirely. But what happens when we over-identify with these labels? When the ego clings to an identity, it becomes a limitation. If you see yourself as successful, your sense of self becomes dependent on achievements. A single setback threatens that identity, causing turmoil. If you identify as a failure, the ego convinces you that no effort will ever change your fate. These attachments restrict growth. A successful person may avoid risks for fear of failure, while someone who believes they are destined to fail might never try at all. The ego traps you in these roles, preventing you from fully exploring who you are. Breaking free requires shifting your perspective. Instead of defining yourself by rigid labels, recognize them as temporary experiences. Instead of saying, "I am a failure," say, "I am experiencing failure right now." This subtle shift reminds you that life is fluid. You are not bound by any single role. Journaling can help reveal how labels shape your identity. Writing them down and questioning their truth can expose them as roles rather than absolute realities. Meditation offers another path to detachment. By focusing on the present, you move beyond past definitions and future projections, freeing yourself from the ego's grip. True liberation comes when you see that you are not your labels, not your successes or failures. You are the awareness behind them, limitless, expansive, and free, waiting to be recognized. The ego dreads vulnerability because it equates it with weakness. From the ego's perspective, admitting fault, showing emotions, or asking for help are signs of inadequacy. It tells you that if you let others see your vulnerable side, they'll judge, reject, or exploit you. This fear keeps you locked in a fortress of emotional armor, afraid to let anyone truly see you. But here's the irony: vulnerability is not weakness, it's profound strength. When you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you open the door to genuine connection and understanding. Think back to a time when someone shared their struggles or fears with you. Chances are, it made you feel closer to them. You didn't see their vulnerability as weakness, you saw it as courage. The ego doesn't understand this. It's obsessed with maintaining control and projecting an image of invincibility. This is why so many people hide behind masks. Whether it's the mask of confidence, competence, or indifference. These masks may protect the ego, but they also isolate you from others. Over time, they lead to loneliness and disconnection, the very things the ego seeks to avoid. To break free from this fear, start by embracing small acts of vulnerability. Share a personal struggle with a trusted friend or express your emotions honestly instead of suppressing them. Notice how liberating it feels to let go of the mask even for a moment. Vulnerability fosters authenticity, which is the antidote to the ego's lies. Meditation can also help you confront the ego's fear of vulnerability. As you sit in silence, observe the ego's resistance to openness. Notice how it tries to protect itself with thoughts like, "Don't share that, you'll look weak." By simply observing these thoughts without judgment, you begin to see through the ego's illusion. True freedom lies in realizing that vulnerability is not something to fear but something to embrace. It's the bridge that connects you to others and to your true self. When you let go of the ego's need for perfection, you discover the beauty of being human. The ego cannot exist without time. It is either rooted in the past, clinging to old regrets, or projecting itself into the future, consumed by worry. Rarely does it allow you to remain in the present, the only place where life actually happens. Consider how much of your mental energy is spent on past mistakes or future anxieties. You may replay an event from years ago, wishing you could change it, or stress over an uncertain future, imagining outcomes that may never come. This constant movement between past and future drains your energy and steals the peace of the present. But the past is gone, it exists only in memory. The future has not yet arrived, it exists only in imagination. The present moment is the only reality, vibrant and full, waiting for your attention. The ego resists this truth because it cannot survive in the now. In the present, there is no room for its stories, fears, or judgments. Mindfulness helps break the ego's hold on time. By focusing on your breath, sounds, or sensations, you anchor yourself in the now. Over time, this quiets the ego's endless chatter, allowing you to experience stillness and clarity. Another way to escape the ego's time trap is gratitude. By appreciating what exists in this moment, the ego's grip weakens. Gratitude shifts your focus from lack to abundance, bringing you back to the richness of now. Freedom from the ego's control comes when you realize that the present is all there ever is. Letting go of the past and future opens the door to a timeless awareness where the ego loses its power. The ego also thrives on division. It separates you from others through judgment, comparison, and us versus them thinking. Whether based on race, beliefs, or personal preferences, it creates boundaries that reinforce a false sense of superiority. How often does your mind judge others? It might say, I am right, they are wrong, or they are different, so they must be inferior. These judgments build walls, preventing genuine connection. On a larger scale, this leads to prejudice, discrimination, and conflict. But these divisions are illusions. Beneath them, we are all connected. The differences the ego clings to, status, beliefs, appearances, are surface level. At our core, we share the same fears, hopes, and desires. Empathy dissolves the ego's separations. Instead of judging, seek to understand. Meditation can also reveal the unity beneath all things, helping you see beyond the ego's false boundaries. When you stop feeding the ego's need for division, you open yourself to compassion, connection, and a deeper truth. True freedom begins when you realize you are not your ego but the awareness behind it.